Rise of the Ronin has been out for a couple of days, and I gotta say, it's a mixed bag of beans. And with that being said, let's get it in. Rise of the Ronin does a couple of things right, a lot of things mediocre, and a couple of things really, really bad. I'm just some guy on the internet, and here's my review for Rise of the Ronin, open world done right. We're gonna be starting off with the bad, because oh my god, brother, it is really bad. Right off the bat, the game looks like ass. It looks terrible. It looks like a PS3 game. Regardless of whether it's daytime, nighttime, morning, noon, the game looks terrible pretty much at all times. It regularly breaks immersion while you're playing. Now, I know graphics don't make a good game. However, you can always use art style if you don't have the power to make things look photorealistic. And in Rise of the Ronin, instead of making a interesting art style, they decided to go super low-end realistic, which is okay if I wasn't paying the full price of a AAA game. There's a huge amount of feathering, pop in, and I mean this game costs $90 before tax. So if I'm going to be paying $90 for a AAA game that is a PS5 exclusive, I do expect a certain quality of standard that comes with it. If you're a AA game, if you want to make a smaller game, I don't mind if the graphics are looking like that, but this is AAA. This is a AAA game with a AAA price. I'm expecting AAA visuals as well. Like, if I'm being totally honest, it's a little insulting that the game came out in the state that it did at the price that it came out of. Because from what I understand, there was no delays. The game got the time it needed to cook, and then it came out when the developers thought it was ready. And if they think this is ready and acceptable, honestly, it does not bode well for any future purchases from Ninja Theory if this is the kind of product they're putting out at full price. The next thing would be the story, which I'll be honest, I barely even remember what the story is about. I know you're trying to either help the shogunate or the anti-shogun faction while the West has made first contact with Japan. You play as one of the two blade twins while you have to go look. You get separated from your blade twin, and your mission is to go find them. And while you go look for them, you can either help the shogunate or the anti-shogunate in the hopes of uniting Japan and the West or separating Japan from the West. Honestly, the story was incredibly forgetful. I forgot the story as I was playing the game. You could slap on any story onto the game and it wouldn't make a difference. Like, honestly, they could have made it completely fictional. They could have made it historically accurate. I don't know, because the story was just so boring that I just could not use the energy to keep track of what I was actually doing. There's a lot of instances in the game where I wasn't sure if I was doing a side quest or if I was doing main story progression, because they honestly both felt exactly the same to me. Now that we've gotten the bad out of the way, let's get into the good sections. First and foremost, the combat is a major improvement on their previous formula. You can see the inspiration they took from Neo and from Wulong to now make Rise of the Ronin, and I think they have finally perfected their counter system. In their previous games like Wulong, you had the counter spark, except it was tied to the dodge button, I believe, and then you also had the demon counter in Neo 2. And the issue in Neo 2 is that the counter wasn't very reliable. You could only use it for specific attacks, and I feel like if you use the blue demon or the purple demon, it was incredibly hard to know when to get that counter off, which made me feel like I didn't have a choice but to play as the red demon, because the red demon was like the most consistent one when it came to counters. When it came to Wulong, the dodging mechanic being linked to the counter mechanic was very good. However, often you would counter when you were trying to dodge, and then you would dodge when you were trying to counter, putting you in an unfavorable position. And also, again, it wasn't as precise as it is in Rise of the Ronin. Thankfully, with Rise of the Ronin, the counter spark works pretty as intended. The enemy will flash red right before they hit you, and if you counter when the red dot flashes at the correct time, I'd say it's like 99.9% of the time you will counter at the correct time if you are following the visual cues. As for the rest of the combat, it kind of does feel like a simplified version of Neo. You still do have your 3 stances, which normally equates to a low, medium, and high stance. The big difference this time around is that instead of making custom movesets for each stance already comes with a loadout. So basically this time around, instead of customizing your loadout, they're giving you pre-made loadouts for your low, medium, and high stance. I do like this new way of doing things because I feel it makes things a little bit more clearer. There's less menus to go through, and it feels a little less like you're playing a video game all the time. In the previous games from Ninja Theory, you would just spend so much time in menus trying to create your character, looking through stats, going through 5 pieces of armor. It was honestly a little overwhelming at times, so I am happy that Rise of the Ronin managed to simplify the Neo combat system while still retaining the essence of the combat. It's still methodical, you still have your counters, you still have your key recover mechanic. However, now you can't spam it as much as you used to. Now you can only do it at the end of your combo when you have your blood gauge filled to the max. So again, very similar to Neo 1 and 2. However, it is a simplified version of the combat, which I really appreciate. As for difficulty, there are difficulty levels in the game. However, you do have a gear system, which basically will make any battle trivial if you simply outgear the other person. Plain and simple. What I do find most impressive about the game has to be the open world. Now, that's not to say that the open world looks good, because it looks like garbage. However, you do have a bunch of side quests and side objectives that you can complete through your playthrough, and each and every one of them does have some sort of impact on your character. They did it correctly. What can I say? They did side activities correctly. If you do a side activity, you'll get a skill point, a new weapon, or perhaps it'll increase the bond between you and one of your allies, affecting the gameplay directly. So now you actually have a reason to go out and explore. You also have a bunch of collectibles you can find, like cats, and you are rewarded for finding these collectibles. The more collectibles that you find, the higher tier of item you can buy from a specific store. So for all the things that it doesn't do well, Rise of the Ronin definitely makes exploring the world fun and interesting for the player, although it is in the most gamey way possible. Speaking about weapons, let's talk about the loot system. Early on into the game, you're going to find that loot is not super abundant and things do feel like they're worth finding. However, once you pass the 10-hour mark of the game, mind you, this is like a 60-hour game. Once you pass the 10-hour mark of the game, you get so much loot constantly that it's bordering on live service territories, but it's not a live service game, so it's kind of weird. And loot just becomes whatever has the biggest number is what I equipped. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not really paying attention to what I do or where I'm doing it. I am just collecting as much loot as I possibly can, and it makes things feel like they have no value. It kind of feels like your sense of progression stops after level 10, because you're the way loot works is that your combat style is dictated by the weapon that you're using. Once you've collected all 12 weapons, you're not really learning anything new, you're not discovering anything new. You have a skill tree, but the skill tree, you won't really learn new attacks. You're mostly just going to be learning, you're mostly going to be getting passive abilities. Some of them will be active abilities, but most of them will be passive. The new moves that you can learn are going to be the combat styles that you get. However, I think that most people are not going to dive into the combat system of weapons that they do not like. So once you found the 2 weapons that you really like, you'll have that as your loadout. And once you have the 6 combat styles that you need, you'll probably stick to that for the rest of your loadout, because the game doesn't really require you to change weapons if you found the one that you like, because the one that you like has a stance that can counter whatever weapon the opponent is using. Unfortunately, the loot system isn't very rewarding after 10 hours to this 40 to 50 hour plus game. Conclusion: So far, I have been having fun with the game, but I cannot recommend it in the state that it's in at full price. This is a $90 game that looks like a PS3 game, and unfortunately, that is just unacceptable for a $100 game. For anyone interested in getting Rise of the Ronin, I would highly recommend that you wait for a sale or something of the sort. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Will you be waiting for a sale? Have you already bought the game? If you did, let me know what it's like. And while you're down there, be sure to like, favorite, share, comment, all that good stuff. And if you don't want to, well, remember, at the end of the day, I'm just some guy in the internet, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. I try to hit 1,000 subs for the end of the year. Please help me with that.